Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name is Stuart. If you've been following the channel recently, you'll have noticed I'm doing a Road to 11th Edition 40k fun little podcast, a limited series with my good friend Dan on the channel. We're talking about the armies that we're painting, and I'm painting some Space Wolves and some Astra Militarum. And as part of that, I recently finished some Blood Claws, and I thought it'd be fun to turn that into a bit of tutorial now. So as I was painting them, I filmed lots of bits, and here's the result. Hopefully you enjoy.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems, and offer custom items to suit your club, your event, or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description.
It doesn't take an awful lot to realise that this isn't a Blood Claw shoulder pad. It was a bit of a weird start to this video, but I didn't film it at this stage. I was just painting them, but I didn't realise I wanted to turn it potentially into a painting video. And this is a little bit of footage that I used in an earlier podcast episode with Dan, and it shows you the colours and the technique that I've used to paint the yellow on the shoulder pads of these Blood Claws. So I thought I'd just slot it in here because I didn't record any footage, and it's better than just explaining it. Throughout this video I'll be holding up the paints that I'm using to camera. If you want to make a note of them, just pause the video at that time. I'll also put a post up on my Patreon, which will be available to free users to view as well, which will have all the paints used in this tutorial, so you can go and see them all there in one go. And this was the finished Dreadnought, if you are interested. I have changed the basing now over to something to match the rest of the army. We'll cover that at the end. But these are the blues and greys using all army paint at the moment. So I'm, as you can see, going over the whole miniature with the darkest of those blue greys at the moment. Mostly a black prime miniature with a little bit of overspray there for when I've painted the shoulder pads, as I've just described. And then the green areas on those shoulder pads is actually the liquid mask that I've used on top, just to protect those yellow areas. In a short while you'll see what it looks like when it's taken off. I like to work fairly zenithal in style. It's not completely zenithal because I'm using colours here, but you can definitely work with the light with your airbrush. So I'm working without black prime, allowing a lot of the darker recesses to remain there, and make sure that my layers of paints are quite thin, and I build them up gently. And as I move through that spectrum of blue greys, I'm focusing the lighter ones where the light would hit on the tops of the armour plates. I've even gone over the shoulder pads there where I know that that's going to be removed because that's just liquid and mask, but it just helps me place the light and make sure that any overspray from that area will hit the miniature in the correct places, so when that's peeled away again, it still looks like the light is where it should be. Now, I won't be doing a lot of edge highlighting with these miniatures. It's not the style I like to paint with an awful lot anyway. I quite like my miniatures to look relatively grim and dark, but this whole project has been a little bit brighter than I maybe would paint a Horus Heresy army. A little bit less in terms of the weathering, a little bit less in terms of the oils and things, so I will be using some of those. So it's somewhere in between, one foot in the non-edge highlighting kind of realms, and another foot in that, still using some oils and making them look a little bit more grim and dirty than definitely an heavy metal style paint job. Now, what you can see me doing here now, I've got all of those greys down. I'm using that speed paint underneath, so I'm actually adding shadow from the bottom of the miniature. So I'm basically turning it upside down, adding some shadow back in, reinforcing it a little bit. So I've got the top highlights on now. I'm just giving it a boost from the bottom, especially some areas where sometimes you can lose a little bit of that depth with all the airbrush layers that you put in. It just adds this really nice transition from those brightest areas all the way to the lightest. And then what I'm doing now is just adding a little bit of dry brushing white onto the hair and the fur areas, and this is to provide some underpainting, because for those areas I'm going to base coat them using contrast or speed paints. By light, I'm able to dry brush over the leather packs and the scabbards for the little blades, and this will also provide an excellent underpaint for any leather style contrast paints that I want to put over as well. And it just speeds the whole painting process up. So you're starting with some nice edge highlights, almost, even though I said I wouldn't do any, that are covered there by the dry brushing, so when I apply those thinner contrast style paints, it just really picks out all that detail underneath. Basically the speed paints or the contrast paints doing their job. I'm also just touching up here, after I've removed the liquid mask, any of the paint on the edges of the shoulder pads that isn't quite neat enough. So I've got all of those paints out on my wet palette and just doing a little bit of a touch up and just reinforcing the highlights there right on the rims of those shoulder pads. I'm back to focusing on the armour and some weathering. I'm going to be using a sponge method for the weathering there. I've just made a little bit of grey sponge, a little bit more sort of uneven, and ripped a few bits out, and I'm using a sponging tool here as well. This is from Knott's Hobbies actually. There's a link in the video description. It's not an affiliate link, I don't earn anything from it, but a great small business based in Nottingham. So I'm just dabbing on little areas of the darker brown paint, and so you can create this sort of chipped armour effect, and the brown is perfect to use with this sort of light bluish grey. And then the lighter brown, I'm going back with a small brush, just a little bit of paint on the end, and adding that lighter colour to the centre of those slightly larger chipped areas. So you've got the darker area and then the lighter area in the middle, so essentially you're highlighting the middle of your chips. And I think that looks really, really nice for more of that cleaner style weathering effect. Whereas with a Heresy army, I might go straight for a black chipping or just a standard brown and rely an awful lot on some more weathering powders and streaking and lots of oils and things. But like I've already said, I'm going to be a little bit lighter on that kind of thing with these miniatures. I want them to look a little bit brighter, even though they might retain some of that realistic element to them. This is Grim Black from Army Painter Speed Paint. You can obviously use contrast blacks as well. I'm a big fan of this one at the moment. It's a really nice mix between the two contrast ones from Citadel. Actually, it does the job sort of in the middle of them both. I find it pretty strong in the recesses, or gives you a good strong black shade, but it does run away off those flatter areas too, so you've got that natural sort of highlight showing through. And that's all I'm doing for the little sort of rubber areas that join the armor panels. Again, remember the miniature is quite light with these lighter areas of grey, which I've airbrushed, so by applying a neat thin layer of this in between, runs into the recesses and then leaves those higher areas a little lighter looking, and it's just perfect. Paint them in neatly, and I don't really do anything else with it. I'm all about doing things like this to save time, but to still have a really cool looking unit at the end. And hopefully you'll agree when you see the finished unit that it looks a pretty decent tabletop standard, a higher tabletop standard, but I still cut lots of corners like this in order to save time. I'd love to individually highlight every rib of those leather or rubber areas, but I just haven't got the time for that when I want to play games as well. Returning now to those areas of leather where I've dry brushed a little bit to provide some underpainting. I'm using two browns here, ruddy brown to start with. I'm painting some of the chainsword handles in the colour, and also some of the scabbards and holsters for their bolt pistols as well. A nice thin even layer, and what happens is that lighter grey colour that you've got there provides a nice base, and because I've dry brushed over the edges, those sharper edges that you get from the dry brushing show through as well. It's almost like you've already edge highlighted them underneath, which is great. The effect looks fantastic as it is. I'm just using the other brown to add a little bit of variation and some of the smaller pouches that are on the miniature as well. While that's drying, I'm moving over to the skin. I'm going to paint this in a more of a standard method. So I'm starting with a sort of a mid to lower mid tone flesh base and working my way through the whole unit at this stage. I paint flesh in lots of different ways. I usually work dark to light and highlight up. I'm pretty much going to be doing that here, but I am going to be using this flesh wash, which I'm really enjoying at the moment, from Army Painter Warpaint range as well. Just do a nice even wash all over, just to darken that tone a little bit from that first flesh level. It just gives you a really nice looking finish, and then I'll go back afterwards and re-highlight using that base tone, and then move up through the spectrum of lighter and lighter flesh tones. For a standard unit like this, you probably only need to add 2 more maximum on top of that, maybe even get away with 1 if you wanted to. And this is still a pretty basic paint job, but having nice striking, fairly neat faces will really draw the eye in against the blue and the yellow there. So you get these really nice color combinations that offset each other, and I think it just frames the overall look of Space Wars and why they quite often look very, very striking as a set of miniatures. And the faces, the flesh just stands out so well from those other colors. I'm just focusing across the top of the nose, on the forehead, on the cheekbones a little bit, and just sort of slowly picking out those details, working with the details on the miniature before I move on to that very, very top highlight. And by that stage I'm just putting a few faint highlights here or there, very much focusing on the brow of the eyes and the little end of the nose, and maybe a little bit across the bridge of the nose, and a tiny bit, little dots sometimes on the top of the ear or the cheekbone as well. This could be regarded as too many stages now, but it's so simple I like to do it anyway, and I've done this in a lot of videos, so apologies to long-term viewers. I'm just adding 2 contrast paints here to sort of really enrich the flesh method on these faces and really add a lot of depth to it. So I use the purple tone just into the recesses, like a hairline or something like that, or where the neck meets a collar, or if they have bare hands, where a hand meets a cuff. And then I use the reddish colour thinned a little bit and focus on the bottom third of the face, especially around the nose and the mouth area, and just glaze it on, making sure that I'm blending it out and feathering it out a little bit with the same brush, but I just rinse it off and add a little bit of water there, and it just changed the tone overall, makes it look a little bit more realistic, and softens some of the highlights together, and sort of it just adds a bit of a filter really, which I think really works. This is mocha skin, but I'm not going to be using it for any flesh tones in this video. I'm actually using it to be the edge highlight on the leather pouches and the holsters and the scabbards for all of the Marines. And this is a little bit of edge highlight I am doing, and focus it in certain areas. I'm not doing it all over the different panels of the armor, but I don't mind doing it on little packs like this and things. And they're so angular it's quite easy to pick out, and because of the way that I've underpainted, as I've already mentioned, with that dry brushing and then the thin speed paint layers on top, you can normally see the lines where you need to add them, because they're already visible because of the thin speed paints. And the same thing with this manticore yellow here. There's lots of little straps holding teeth and bones and things on them, a few little details here and there, and I've used those same base colours, speed paints, for these, and I'm just adding a slightly different colour highlight to have a little bit more sort of differences in colour and tone throughout the miniatures, but just the odd little line here or there just to pick out and make it pop a little bit. I didn't want to paint all of the red triangular markings that the blood claws should have on their right shoulder pads, so I decided to order some transfers for it. These are from the Mighty Brush. I think they are called the Norse range or something like that. First time I've ordered from them, came super quick, lovely instructions inside, and you get this little sheet here, and they were really good. They work just like the best quality transfers that I have from Games Workshop, and I've tried from other places, and they do loads and loads of different stuff as well. I'll pop a little link in for a second transfer tutorial. It's back to using more contrast and speed paint, and I have a selection lined up for the hair. I really wanted to focus on the blonde hair and the red hair in different variants, or at least reddish browns, and I have the browns as well. Just really like the overall palette, and it works really well with the blue grey armour. I think blacks and things will work at the same time. You can use whatever you like. Because I've underpainted, and I keep talking about that because I spend that bit of time dry brushing the hair earlier on, you've got this white highlight already on all of the top areas of the hair. So a nice neat thin coat of a contrast style paint, and the hair looks done. And in many cases I didn't go back and highlight. If you apply your contrast paints well and you've got a really good underpaint in there first, it just looks great. So there are lots of little bones and teeth and trinkets hanging around on their belts, or from little leather strings across their shoulder pads. I've just got a simple 3-stage method for painting bone, sort of a yellowish off ochre colour, a pure bone colour, and a slight off-white, and it's simple layering, highlighting, working towards that whiter tip at the end of them all. After so much sort of working with contrast paints and dry brushing here or there, these weren't in a state that I could use those, so it's just the simplest way of doing it was just to paint them in a good old traditional way, layering up. All speed paint here, and I've got black, I've got grey, and I have white, and there's lots of fur little patches on some of these miniatures. So you've got the sort of the tabard, which is a sort of fur area, and there's little wolf's tails hanging down as well. And I've just wet blended them together. So I started with the black, then the grey, and then went blending to the white on the tip. And I've already dry brushed those areas white like I did with the hair on all of the marines as well. And it's just a really nice, neat way of getting a varied fur colour. And the wet blending is important, but making sure that I'm keeping it thin enough so all of the dry brushing is showing through. As underpainting again, I know I could probably win a prize for the amount of times I've said underpainting in this video, but it's a key to so much of what I do when I'm army painting, trying to save time by using good quality underpainting. Call it slap chop as you will, but what it shows you is that you can achieve nice effects just in certain areas of a miniature. You don't have to apply that slap chop or grisaille, which is the original term for it, all over the whole miniature to do it. You can use it in certain sections while you're still airbrushing armor and things like I've done here. Now I'm a bit boring. I quite like metal coloured weaponry mostly. Don't often go for the sort of the coloured effect as much as they look cool back in the 90s when you had the red bolters and things. I'm a fan of the more sort of realistic, grim looking, so I like to start from darker metallics and then build my way up to silvers. And sometimes I start with a brownish metallic. I've not done that here. I started with a very dark black, almost metallic, and then you'll see here as I build up layers and of dry brushing, I focus towards quite bright silvers towards the end of those chain blades, and then the same with all of their bolt pistols as well. I've been using a lot of P3 paints recently, and these next three here are to add those higher levels of highlighting that I just described. So the black, really dark metallic paint is already down. I'm just building up layers of dry brushing here. I've got a dry palette to put my paint on, and I've got a texture palette here as well, just to test how much paint is coming off from my dry brushing before I apply it to the miniatures. You don't have those horrible moments when you go to dry brush and you get that horrible wet streak because there's a big blob of paint you didn't realise was there. It's always really good to do. I'm just taking my time to sort of slowly build these layers up towards a much more shiny tip to both the bolter and the chainsword, as I've already suggested earlier. For the eagles on their chest, or any other details on their chest, or on the little bits that are holding those wolf's tails to their belts and things, I'm going for a sort of a coppery gold colour. So I'm just working my way through, again, more P3 paints here. Some of them it takes a little bit longer when you've got a whole eagle like that to cover on the chest. You want to make sure you don't mess up and get it on the blue areas that I've already finished. Sometimes it's just a little skull in the centre and it's a lot quicker to do. But again, simple layering, highlighting here, no dry brushing because I don't want to get it anywhere I shouldn't, and just building up to the brighter colours. So I work my way through all these P3 paints, and again, I'm really enjoying them at the moment. The golds just as much as I am the sort of the more steel and silver colours. Getting towards those top highlights now, it's just about adding a little dot here or there where the light would catch, really, rather than covering the whole area. Again, it's simple layering, old school painting, and it works really well as a mix with all of the other different techniques that you can do these days. So I've been airbrushing, I've been sponging, I've been building up layers using dry brushing as underpainting and then contrast, but now just standard layering again with the metallic paints. And it's on to adding basing texture now. I like to add this before I do my oils, because very often the oil paints that I add will also work as part of the basing recipes that I use. With all of the basing texture fully dry, I can get onto the oil paints. This is a carbon from Knott's Hobbies again, and it's a new oil paint that I've been playing with around at the moment. I think they're on sale now, I'm not 100% sure. He did send me them a little while ago, and I've got them on my to-do list to finish a quick review of those, so do look out for the channel in the future. They have a little range of 6 ready mixed oil paints, and this is one of them. If you've never used oil paints before, I would normally recommend sealing your miniature first if you're going to apply them heavily. I'm being subtle, I'm just applying it into the recesses. You want to be using old brushes, and they work slightly differently to sort of standard washes because they don't pull so much on the flat surfaces, so you don't get that horrible tide marks or the streaking that you get. And then once they're touch dry, you can wipe them away again using a little bit of white spirit. But they're great for just getting into the recesses, for doing some recess shading. They also weather really nicely at the same time. Now, I really enjoyed these Knott's Hobbies oils. I did find that they settle very, very quickly, so I was mixing them almost once per miniature, maybe even twice per miniature, but it still worked out fine. This is a different oil wash from a different company, from Scout 75. This is Grease, one of my favourite used paints, and I'm using it in a similar way, a little bit heavier, just on all of the sort of the golder metallic areas, whereas the carbon colour, the black colour, I pretty much used it as a panel liner on all of the armour. Quite often, if this was a heresy miniature, I'd have covered it in a gloss varnish and put a darker brown oil wash all over and made it really grim and dark. Here I'm just trying to still use military modelling techniques, but be a little bit more subtle with it, which I've been obviously describing since the beginning of the video. So this is an AK fast drying thinner. So if you are going to use oil paints and you want to do that tidying up I talked about, you want to make sure you use an artist's white spirit or thinner. So if you use something from a DIY store, you will just strip your paint straight off. So you need to be very, very careful here. What I did do on the video that you didn't see earlier on, I did do a matte varnish after I'd applied the transfers, so they are fairly protected anyway, just not a gloss one. So I'm just going along here with a little bit of that white spirit on my brush, taking away any areas where I felt that the oil paints just went a little bit too far over. So I'm just tidying it up a little bit. You do want to make sure your oils look pretty dry to the touch before you do this, and that can be anything from sort of an hour or up to 24 hours depending on how thickly you apply them and what your climate's like. In this stage, because there was only sort of thin areas in the recesses, it was about an hour before I was able to do this. Next up here, you can just see me adding little dots into the eyes of white. Again, I'm back to my underpainting, and here I'm using the Spirit Stone Red effects paint just to paint in over the top of those white dots once they're dry, of course, and it just provides a little bit of underpainting. It looks like a glow. It's the quickest way to do sort of lens glow, and these are the basing materials that I'm using for this army. So I've moved away from the snow basing that you saw on the Dreadnought. I decided to go with desert, so it matched my Astra Militarum army and the theme I have for them, because they're going to be on campaign together. And I'm just going on top of that base that you already saw, the texture with the oils that went down on it as well. I used the grease, and once that's fully dry, I'm just brushing in dry 3 different pigment powders from AK, and I'm blowing off the excess. And because it's on the base and it's rubbed into all of the texture on there, I won't be sealing it because it stays on there fine because it's just on the base. It just gives you this really lovely dry effect. And you can make a wash out of it if you want, and it does work, and there's other ways of doing it. This works, believe me. And then for me, it's always a black rim on my bases. It's just what I like. You do whatever colour you like as well. But you can see them all finished there. There's the old tuft on the old base, but I wanted to look fairly simple but also pretty dry and arid as well. And the mixture of yellows and whites and sort of orangey tones for me is it will work on a Mars style base, but also on a standard desert sort of matte or something like that as well. I'm really happy with the way they came out. They look fairly striking and bright to match the sort of 40k aesthetics, but because of the oils and some of the methods I use, they've also got a slightly grimier and grim look to your sort of standard heavy metal style box art super neat finish as well. So it's straddling those 2 ideas of painting, which is what I like to do. I think they look, pretty striking to the eye, but didn't take too long either if I've got to paint a whole army. So it's the balance off and try to strike when I'm painting armies. So I want the kind of army that attracts attention, that if I was at an event that might get a chance of winning best painted or a nomination or something like that. But if you look really, really closely, it's not going to win any Golden Doom awards at all. Not at all. But it's still a pretty cool thing, and that's the way I try to paint miniatures, to save me going mad trying to paint every single individual miniature as if it's a character. As nice as that would be, I've got too many projects to spend all that time doing it. But anyway, you let me know what you think of it in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to know more about the projects that Dan and I have been working on, I'll pop a link in now to the playlist. It's done as a podcast format on YouTube, which means you can watch it just like a normal YouTube video, but you can also listen to it audio only using YouTube's music service. Is a separate app that's free to download, which means you can fully download and just listen to the audio when you're on the go. So even people that aren't premium members of YouTube, who is, I don't pay for premium YouTube, you can still listen to it like a regular podcast. There are visual elements to it. We do show off pictures of what we've been working on. That's part of it. So it's probably better visually if you've got time to watch it that way. But you just want to hear us ramble along to 30 to 45 minutes and nice short episodes, do go and check them out. This channel is very much dominated by Warhammer the Old World and many other things, but I will continue to paint many different game systems, and that will include Warhammer 40k at times, especially as I'm working on these projects. There will be more videos like this for those of you who like just painting in general. Will get something from these videos, and those of you that like Warhammer 40,000 will hopefully enjoy them that little bit more. So if you have enjoyed the video, please do give it a like, drop a comment below. It really helps the video get shown to other people by YouTube's algorithms, and the way that works is all about engagement, because it shows people are liking it, so therefore it shows it to more people, and it's the easiest and cheapest way you can help me. If you want to help me a little bit further, check out the link to my Patreon in the video description. Thank you to all my existing patrons for all the support that you give me. I wouldn't be able to make half the amount of content that I do without your financial support. I love making the videos, I love working on the channel, but it does take an awful lot of time to paint and edit and all of those kinds of things. So the financial support means I can keep doing it and keep the channel partly one foot in my businesses as Miniature Realms, which is a really, really cool thing. So thank you again. Also check out the channel sponsor, Counter Attack Bases. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.